Virginia, North Carolina, Kansas, a lot of Missouris. I know Mississippi just joined us, Pennsylvania. There's Mississippi. 12:01, so I'm going to give it another minute or so before we get started. Sam, hi Sam from Missouri. So it sounds like Lisa is not hearing what we're saying. Mm-hmm. Here. Okay. All right. Steph, are you sending Lisa the link? Okay. Well, it might be in my paste. Let me look here. Yeah, there we go. That was luck from where I just sent it to Jess. Okay, it's 12:03. Let's get this party started. So today it is amazing because we have folks, like I said, I think we're gonna have folks all the way from Washington to New Hampshire because we are going to have what's called AV, Access and Visitation recipients. It's a federal grant. I'm going to talk about that today, but they are all watching, if you will, hoping to learn something. Hopefully I can teach some things today in terms of how we are doing it in the state of Missouri. And then today is just going to be a big highlight of basically this past fiscal year. We've had a lot of growth this past fiscal year. And so today you'll get to hear about that. Some housekeeping stuff. Feel free, you can put questions in the chat, but I'm going to be honest, I've got 26 slides I've got to get through in the next like 50 something minutes. So I'm going to be pretty focused. However, at the end, I will answer all the questions and or Stephanie, she's on here, Stephanie Bloom-Levy. She's support staff. She will be answering questions as she can as we go. And then she said she'll leave me the ones that she don't have answered. She doesn't have answers for at the very end. So just so we can keep this thing moving. So we are recording this. It's going to be posted on our YouTube channel. I'm going to minimize all of your faces so I can see my screen and we will start into this. So our agenda for the next hour, if you will, is examining the M.A.R.C.H services, looking at our funding. That's always a big question that I get in terms of, Dawn, how are you funded? Celebrating our accomplishments, discussing the intake process, looking at our service usage in terms of how is the state of Missouri using our services, and then looking at the satisfaction of those services as well. And then we're going to wrap up with some of my dreams, goals for the next fiscal year. So M.A.R.C.H, just for those of you that aren't familiar, M.A.R.C.H started as a pilot project in 1997, specifically to fill the gap, if you will, between access, parenting time, and child support. And as you know, it's an ongoing issue. Parents are paying child support, but not having access to children. And so the idea was, why don't we create a mediation program and provide legal services to families so they can sort of receive what we call a full component in terms of helping families, both parents, have access to children. We are located in Liberty, Missouri, which is just outside of Kansas City. But we are a statewide provider, and that sometimes is confusing. A lot of the local people even think that we're just local, and that's not the case. So we do provide the whole state, and I'm going to show some fun numbers today on what those on who we served this past fiscal year. So that's one of the reasons I do this every October. It's a fantastic look at what we've done in the past, and then also like where we plan on going in the future. So we have 3 full-time staff here at M.A.R.C.H. Mindy's on here. Mindy's the intake coordinator. So she receives court orders from the court, the online requests, telephone calls from my 800 number. She processes all of those. She's always on the phone, which I know can be emotionally exhausting. So we are very, very appreciative of Mindy. And then we've got Steph, who once the case is then ready to be set, then she refers it out to the provider. So whether it's attorney work or a mediator or a supervisor for the visits, she then connects the case with the contract provider and goes from there. We have a handful of interns that have come and gone over the years, which is always fun. But actually we have one intern on our call. Her name is Melissa. She's working on an MSW at Missouri State University, and she's going to be joining us this January. And so at the very end, when I talk about some of the goals, we're going to talk about some of the things that Melissa's going to do for us. But we have kids from high school level, college level to graduate level in terms of who they help. I think I call them kids because you can start, the closer you get to 50, you can start to call them kids. But it's just nice to have all these people who want to be involved. And right before I jumped on here, we had another phone call from another person at Missouri State talking about an internship. So it's just nice to always have the support like that. So we are a nonprofit, and that is one of the components that I think is important, because a lot of times people will call us and they will say, you know, like they think that we're connected to the court, and we are not connected to the court. We have our own database. We have our own ways of doing everything. We have to operate as a nonprofit, meaning that I have a board of directors. So Rachel Blankenship, I always joke, she's my boss, if you will. I have John Jenwright, who's my boss with the state of Missouri, and then I have Rachel, who's my boss with the board. I have lots of bosses. But we have an amazing board of directors. But one of the things that I want others to be thinking about in terms of if you ever are interested in serving or helping with M.A.R.C.H, we have lots of committees and ways that you can help us. 2 big things that are coming up. We plan to increase our digital presence. And so if you know anything about like podcast or any sort of digital media marketing stuff, I certainly invite you to join on one of our committees that we've got. And then we also plan on hosting a big conference, a statewide conference in 2025. M.A.R.C.H has always teamed up with what's called Missouri AFCC in the past. And then the pandemic hit and leadership changed. And so we used to do a conference with them, but now we're just going to try to do this on our own. And so if you're interested in working with us and serving on that conference committee, we would certainly appreciate your help. So we'll just start off with one of the big questions that I often get. How are you funded? I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. We have basically 2 main funding sources. One is our federal grant, which is an access and visitation grant. And that's why we have a lot of what's called AV recipients on the line with us today. So the state has, or the feds have a formula in terms of how each state receives funding. Then the state has to do a 10% match on that. So typically our funding in the past has been about $175,000 from that grant. And then the state has to match it 10%. The other component of this is that we also have a lobbying firm that works for us down in Jeff City that secures funding from what's called general revenue. And so that is, I always call it funny math, because so for example, the lobbying firm, they helped secure what's $34,000 for us this past year. And $34,000 in crazy money, the way that we do it here, it's actually $100,000, because the feds will match a 2/3 for 40 funds, for 40 services. So $34,000 secured by the lobbying firm is actually $100,000 for M.A.R.C.H. I know, it's crazy math, right? But the goal is for us to keep growing. When I took over M.A.R.C.H in 2019, we literally only had our AV grant. And that was tough because you're looking at most $200,000, and we do a 50-50 split with our contract providers. So that put us at a budget of about $100,000 to operate a whole statewide nonprofit. And so like my first year, I'm not shy about any of this. I had a salary of $10,000, and then my second year was $30,000. And, you know, the goal is just to keep working all that up. But and obviously continuing to figure out how we can better pay our providers, better pay staff, you know, just have good quality both inside and outside of the office. So today I'm going to walk you through some of what we've done, or at least, or if not the past year, at least over the past 4 years, which has just been super fun you get to see some actual numbers today that just make me smile, I'll be honest. So for those of you that don't know what the AV funding is, I thought I'd just cut and paste it directly from their website. And I will share this PowerPoint at the very end. I will send an email out, and it's going to have a recording of this, and it's going to have all of my PowerPoint that you can just view as you see fit. And then it's also going to have some handouts that I'm going to reference today in terms of maps of our service usage. So every year, about $10 million in what's called mandatory grant funding goes to states and territories to operate the AV program. The goal of this AV funding is to help increase non-custodial parents' access to and time with their children. So one of the interesting things that I see whenever I look at all the different ways, every state uses this AV funding very differently, which is just interesting to me in terms of how it's funneled, if you will, how it's spent, who it's helping. But obviously the ultimate goal is to increase access and visitation for parents. So I want to start with some good feel-good stuff. So our accomplishments for this past fiscal year. So we have a federal fiscal year, which means obviously October 1st to September 30th. So what we just wrapped up during that fiscal year, we were able to secure over $600,000 in funding for free 4D services, mediation visits, legal services. We served 543 families. So kudos to all of our mediators that are on here. That is because of you. That number has doubled since I've taken over in 2019. 75% of those families actually reached an agreement in mediation. So I factored out the no-shows. Okay. So I figure if you don't show up, I'm not going to have you drag my numbers down. So the people that actually showed up for mediation, 75% of them reached an agreement. This year, for my first year ever since I took over leadership, we served every circuit in the state of Missouri. Woo! That is amazing. I'm not going to lie. It's always been mind-boggling to me why we would have certain circuits that wouldn't take advantage of free services, but we have now eliminated that problem. Every circuit has now been officially served by M.A.R.C.H, which is just absolutely amazing. We served 57 families this year with free legal services. So that's nearly tripled since I started. When I first started in 2019, we didn't even really utilize that. We didn't fulfill that part of our contract the way that we should have, I'll be completely honest. And so we have come a long way, baby. It's pretty much gone from 0 to 57 since 2019, and I'm very proud of that. We have launched a supervised visitation program, which I will talk about today. We've expanded mediation services to include families with children in foster care. That is now part of my contract as well. And overall, last year, nearly 800 children benefited from the services that you all provide. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a lot of families who are benefiting from what we're doing here at M.A.R.C.H. So free 4D services, that's the bulk of what I do, what we do here at M.A.R.C.H. 4D simply just means child support enforcement's involved. So we have 3 main services: supervised visitation, mediation, and the legal service. And we also pay the court filing fee for folks when they want it filed with the court. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like. So in order to provide the whole state, we contract with providers all over the whole state. So I'm going to minimize this screen for a second and take you to our website, because one, we just had a website refresh. This is amazing. When I took over in 2019, our website was so embarrassing. And then we slowly redid it. And then now we just received a big major refresh. And so it's a very user-friendly tool. I encourage you to get on here and navigate it. It's got a lot of resources on here that's going to help you. So one of the big tools, just yesterday, we received an email from one of the local circuits asking who our providers was. And they said they had a list from like 2019 or something like that. One of the things that I'm super proud of, and this is Stephanie, this is her baby, if you will. She keeps a real-time list of every provider that we have across the state of Missouri. So the easiest thing would be finding the mediators in your area, and or it's going to be our contract supervisors as well. So you can just click on, so yesterday when the 16th Judicial Circuit reached out and said, who are the mediators or who are the providers in our area? Literally everyone across the state can just click and see who is providing that service. So mediators, and it also outlines if they do contract attorney work. So that's helpful because sometimes if people actually are needing modifications or if they're needing parenting plans filed with the court, we want to make sure we connect them with someone who can do that sort of two-part process, if you will. So this is our list. And then we also have on here our visit supervisors. That portion of our program, so we got Kim Keys on there, that portion of our program is growing. So the numbers are obviously smaller. It's just the same as, watching a baby grow, if you will. But I think this has made me very excited because it actually puts a face to M.A.R.C.H. I think in the past, we were just sort of the statewide entity. We were sort of faceless. And so now you can actually click on and see who the providers are in your circuit. And then the judges can put it in the court order. Parties can request it. The opportunities are endless in terms of how people want to use that this particular tool. The other thing that I sort of envision, if you will, is a lot of times judges will say to me like, Dawn, I don't even know who the visit supervisors are in my area. That's the other thing, is like, this is just to be a tool for the whole family court in terms of who's providing services all across the state that's going to benefit the court system, benefit families. So we'll get back in here. Hopefully it won't start me from, wrong thing. There we go. Okay. The other component in terms of how we are able to operate at the statewide level is we went 100% paperless a little over a year ago, and we use a system called M.A.R.C.H. It was designed for law firms. It's like CLEO, but it is very user-friendly for us in the sense of all of our mediators, all of our contract providers know all of their cases in here. So the blessing of M.A.R.C.H. is that we only have to pay for our actual staff to use it, which is about $237 a month. And then all of our contract providers are just kind of listed as clients, if you will, but then they are connected to the cases. And that's how we share all of that information. So far, knock on wood, M.A.R.C.H. has not had any sort of data breach that I have known of. And we've been with them, like I said, for easily over a year, if not close to 2 years. And so we feel very secure, very good in terms of using them as our method, if you will, of keeping and sharing information with our contract providers. So the supervised visitation portion is the newest portion of our program. It is done on the same sort of referral process. People aren't actually doing visits in our facility. The goal is for us to contract providers across the state, and everybody gets to do business the way that they like to do business. So we are contracting with actual visitation centers. We're contracting with individuals. It's just a matter of, whoever wants to contract with us and fulfill that contract, we're going to take them and add them to our website and keep going from there. The families are allowed up to 2 2-hour visits per week. The supervised visits can be in person, virtual, or by phone. As you know, there's lots of ways to connect. And so we only provided about 7 this past fiscal year. So the numbers are low, I'm not going to lie. But considering we were at 0 last year, I guess we're moving in the right direction. So the goal this year, obviously, is to see if we continue to increase those numbers. And so if you are ever interested in looking at the contracts for our program, let me show you. Let me see. Okay, good. I'm watching Stephanie's screen to make sure I'm seeing what you guys can see. So there is this tab up here. It's called For Professionals on our website. Right here, there's a section that says M.A.R.C.H contract providers. So all you have to do is get on here. So if you're interested in being a contract attorney, looking at what it takes to be a mediator for us, or doing supervised visits, here's all the contracts. And then for those of you that are other AV providers or recipients, you're more than welcome to look at our contracts and see if they can help you in any way. Or I'm always open to feedback as well in terms of how we can be helping each other. So the mediation, this is obviously why M.A.R.C.H was created. M.A.R.C.H is an acronym that stands for Mediation Achieving Results for Children. I don't know if I actually said that in the beginning. I think you figured it out though. So this is the bulk of our work. This is really where the focus is, if you will. And again, if the family has an open 4D case, then they receive free services. And one of the questions that I've been asked is, if they do they have to do all of the services? No, like they can do supervised visits only. They could do mediation only. They can use mediation and the legal service. It's really up to the family in terms of what they need. However, if they need to use all of them, they certainly can. There's no limit on that in terms of you don't just get to use one service and be done. So the goal is what I would call wraparound services, maybe starting with the mediation, then they agree to do supervised visits, and then we toggle over to a provider here within us who can do the visits, and then they fulfill that portion and maybe go back to their mediator and then file that agreement with the court. So you're really just thinking about how to take families from beginning to end and helping them have that increased time. So our families, in terms of our contract with the state of Missouri, they get up to 4 hours of free mediation per year. So like now my new year has started. And so families will be eligible for free services again. Mediation is done in person, virtually, or by phone. And I've got some numbers on that here in a minute and show you what that looks like in terms of how people are using it since the pandemic. Our mediations are just like any other mediations. They can be done with or without attorneys, with or without guardian ad litems. But the bulk of our clients are never married or parents who are looking to modify. There are special cases where grandparents are a third-party intervener, and so I've done lots of those mediations. However, that's where our service stops, in the sense of that's where my contract stops. I can do mediation with those cases, but we cannot do the legal work on those cases. And honestly, it gets way more complicated. So sometimes people will have an open divorce case, but they cannot use the legal service component because that doesn't fall within the parameters of my contract with the state. So, but we still can help them with that mediation. So this is just fun. I love looking at these numbers in terms of our service usage has doubled since 2019. And you can just see that it slowly keeps going up every year. And then, like I said before, we have served every circuit in Missouri with free mediations this past fiscal year. And obviously the goal is to keep doing more of that. Our mediations are, again, just like any other mediation, in the sense that parents can talk about parenting time, transportation, exchanges, child support, arrearage, healthcare, tax deductions, anything that's going to go into a parenting plan that can be discussed in our mediation sessions. These are just some fun, quick numbers in terms of outcomes. So this is the past fiscal year. As I talked about before, 75% reached an agreement in mediation. 37% of those took that mediation agreement and put it into a court order. And so when it says agreement with order, it simply can just mean that M.A.R.C.H helped them with the order, or their private attorneys helped them with the order. one of the requirements of our contract with the state is that we have to do a post-mediation evaluation. So when the pandemic hit, obviously we had to pivot like everybody else in terms of finding electronic formats on how we could gather data. So the easiest and best way was to create SurveyMonkey evaluations, and that's what we have done. So we have what we do on the intake process. We actually have a checkbox that we check. We ask the parties, is it okay if we communicate with you via text? And then if they say yes, which I'll be honest, I don't think we've had anybody say no at this point, we check the box, and then we begin communicating with them through text messaging through our My Case portal. So My Case allows you the ability to email, the ability to text. I mean, it's amazing, and it's all there in one place. So everybody who touches that case can see what it looks like. Everybody who touches the case within M.A.R.C.H, I should say. So post mediation, once we receive the mediation results, if you will, from the mediator, we then send out, like I said, this via text message. We send a link that says, basically asking them were they satisfied with the process, were they satisfied with their mediator, what method of mediation did they use in terms of the format, was it in person, phone, we just ask them all these questions. So so this is per parent report. Most of them indicate they talked about parenting time, 91%, but they can check more than one box on the SurveyMonkey form. 70% said custody, 68 said child support, transportation, health insurance. And so we had 74 people actually fill out that survey. And that's just something that our mediators can maybe help with in the future, to say, hey, M.A.R.C.H is going to send you a survey through their text, through their texting app. Can you please make sure you fill out that survey so we know how to better help you? So if they can hear that in multiple places, that would be really nice. That way we can make sure we're gathering some good data. But in terms of the mediation formats that were used last year, looks like close to 33% did it in person, close to 20% did it by phone, and then 48% were basically virtually. So, which is fine. I mean, I begin to think about concepts like access to justice. And when you begin to think about the 4D clientele in terms of what their needs are, not everybody has a car, not everybody has, childcare, not everybody can take off half a day of work. I mean, if they're already behind on child support, taking off half a day at work is not going to make a lot of sense. And so I feel like people are in the Amazon parking lots and all these different places now on their lunch hour mediating, which is totally fine, because the goal is, to create a win-win for everyone. So in terms of satisfaction with the mediation process, when I began to look at the numbers from average to very high, 70% of them were satisfied with the process. And I always just love this. It's always the same every year. People are very satisfied with their mediators. And so I take the average to very high, and it's 76%. And so even if they weren't happy with what happened during the mediation process, in terms of maybe they didn't reach an agreement, maybe they're just frustrated, they always, not always, but more often than not, are very satisfied with the mediator. And so that makes me happy, in the sense of, I know that we have an amazing list of mediators. And I'll be honest, part of how we've been able to acquire such a list of amazing mediators, as we actually have been able to pay more starting this past fiscal year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a bit. So one of the things that has been added to our contract just this summer is that Family Support Division modified some language saying that the contractor, which is M.A.R.C.H, shall provide mediation services to eligible parents who have children in state agency custody. So the idea is that the parents are paying child support to the state. However, even if the child support is set at 0, they are still eligible for the service. we are still navigating how to make all of these parts work and talk to each other, but we are getting there. Let's just say that. So lastly, in terms of the 4D free services, we have legal services that we provide to families. So what will happen is they will do the mediation, and then they are going to want this filed with the court. And so we in Missouri have received an informal legal opinion from the Missouri Bar that says that mediators are allowed to do what we would call this dual role for the purpose of drafting and filing. So they have to have the party sign a waiver saying that they know that the attorney is representing one of them for the sole purpose of drafting and filing to get this with the court. And so far we're doing that. So the mediator then will then switch put on a different hat, if you will, have the party sign the waiver, draft, and then file the documents. And like I said, typically the attorney will pay the filing fee and then include that in their invoice back to us. And so, as I said before, in 2019, there was probably a big goose egg there, not much happening in terms of legal service usage. But now we are up to about 57 cases this past fiscal year, which again, just makes me very happy. We are heading in the right direction. So sitting back and looking at some of the big accomplishments that we've had this past fiscal year, we have increased our contract providers. We're up to about 80 now across the state, which is amazing. I think back when I started, maybe were hovering around 50 or so, 50, 60. We've been able to increase the payment for our contract providers to what I would call a fair market range. When I came on in 2019, we were paying $325 for 4 hours of mediation, which is not very, I don't know. I'm going to just stop there. So finally now we are in the fair market range. We have this past year, we trained hundreds of people all over the globe, virtually and in person. And I'm going to talk about what we do with that training money, because I'll be honest, that's how we fund our lobbying firm. So when a family is not eligible for the free services, meaning they do not have an active 4D case with the state of Missouri, we provide what's called a fee-based mediation. So they can pay. Each party pays $200. We do a 50-50 split with the mediator. And so we did 124 of those this past year. We celebrated about a year being 100% paperless, which is amazing. We hired Stephanie, which has been absolutely amazing. It was just me and Mindy for a long time trying to keep the wheels on the bus. So glad I'm no longer fighting to keep wheels on the bus anymore. And then we also have done a fun thing in terms of securing what's called a fiscal agent role for the Clay County Parenting Court program. So right across the street is the Clay County Courthouse, and they have a parenting court program. It's actually been recognized nationally in terms of how they're doing it. And we are the fiscal agent for that program through the state of Missouri. So some helpful information in terms of how people get to us. One is obviously through a court order. And so you can name the mediator in the court order if you prefer. There is a sample court order on our website. I say the easiest way to get people to us is by having them fill out an online service request. This has probably been what I would call one of the biggest game changers for us. So literally they click on request a service, and this information goes directly to our My Case portal and starts what's called a lead. So it's super easy. They fill in their name. And for those of you that are on here that are AV providers, I have put in all of the AV data. So it's already gathered. The parties are already filling this all in through self-reporting. And so obviously we need their birth date, social security number, income, race, and then we do have to have the other parent's contact information. So just to circle back, we are not a court program. We do not have access to the other parent's information whatsoever. So we need to have their name, we need a phone number or an email address, and then obviously providing us with the name of the children. And then if there's any sort of special notes. And so if this case is going to be for supervised visits, go ahead and write that in there. If there's a particular mediator you need to use, write anything in there that you think is going to be helpful, or have the clients write that in there. And then literally the parties hit submit form. It then goes to Mindy for processing. And Mindy then sends every case down to Jeff City, which is our main child support office. And they tell us whether or not that case is eligible for free services. They give us the 4D number, then they send it back to us. Mindy then decides, like, figures out what to do with the case from there. So if indeed it's eligible for the free services, then she will contact the parties and tell them, hey, you're eligible for free services. Do you want to proceed? If there's no court order in place. And then otherwise, if it's not eligible for free services, we kind of have a decision tree at that point, if you will. Then they can apply for services through the Department of Social Services, or they can pay $200 each and just do the mediation through that. This, I'm not going to lie, this has changed a lot of how we do things in terms of having the ability for people to just do it by themselves online. It makes it so much easier. People can still call us at the 1-800 number. The phone rings all day. And like I said, or you can just email court orders to us, and then Mindy can work with it there. So that wraps up the 4D, if you will, in terms of the funding that comes from the state, the funding that comes from the feds, who we serve, how we serve them. That's what that looks like. Now, there's other components in terms of how we help families and how we secure funding to pay for the lobbying efforts. So obviously I'm not using state or federal funds to pay for that. So that's where this comes in over here. So I've been very transparent in terms of, in order to secure the funding from general revenue, you have to have a lobbying firm. I did not make up these rules. That's just sort of the nature of the beast, if you will. And so that is where, when people pay for mediation, that's where that funding goes. And when we offer training, so our trainings generate about $30,000 to $40,000 a year alone, and that helps offset the cost of the lobbying firms. And then obviously we have smaller things in terms of maybe some fundraisers here or there, private donations, but that is another thing that I would like to add to our goals in the future, is figuring out how to do some fundraising or things of that nature. But I got a long list of things to do, and I don't know when that's going to get added to my list, but it's out there in case anybody ever wants to help or think about how to help me with that. So the fee for service mediation program, like I said, the families, they just make their payment through the My Case portal. It's got an easy online payment process. In terms of the service usage for this, last year, well, 2022, the end of that fiscal year, we had 97 cases that used the service. And then this past fiscal year that just wrapped up, we had 124. This is not domestic only. So I'll be honest, if anybody calls up and says, hey, we need to mediate, if we have a mediator who's willing to take the case, we'll process it. So I did one of like these two guys who have a small business out on the West Coast. I did not charge them the $400, I'll tell you that much. But we have the fee for service option for pretty much anything that's out there. So just to kind of put that in your back pocket, if it's something that even sounds unusual or interesting, I'm always willing to see how we can take it on. We've done some like probate matters. We had 3 siblings, and so each sibling paid $200 on that particular case. So I'm all about being creative in terms of how we can help people who just are seeking some mediation services. So in terms of our trainings, I do want to switch back to the website on this, because so you go to the professionals tab, and there are a couple things I want to highlight. So you click on here and you click on access the trainings. We offer free trainings pretty much every quarter, but we've got like 2 or 3 this quarter. It's crazy. So Whitney next month, she's going to do compassion fatigue. She has been working with as a victim advocate for years. And so talk about somebody who knows what she's, how to be resilient. Whitney is definitely going to be a good presentation, and that's free. We have a lot of people who donate these in kind. And so I'm so grateful that we have an amazing community that does this. Obviously there's me. And then in February, Michelle Dunn's going to do one on like how to prep your clients for mediation. But this is always like, if you're ever just needed some CLEs or just curious on what's going on, just always come and check out our free trainings page. I'm very proud of that. Again, that's Stephanie's baby. She really does a great job of keeping that information up to date. The other component in terms of trainings is what I would call the basic mediation training. So this would be relevant to the Kansas and Missouri folks. If you are ever knowing of anyone who needs to be trained, please send them our way. We have some amazing presenters. So Lindsay Matthews and I will be doing a training, I think in 2 weeks on domestic mediation. And then this coming February and March, Chrissy Del Percio and Callissa Malloy are going to be giving a training. And I'm just going to say this. If I could be a fly on the wall and be with them for this training, I would totally do it, because Chrissy and Callison are the 2 of the coolest chicks I've ever met in my entire life. And if I could be trained by them, I totally would. So just throwing that out there, that I really appreciate the amazing people that help support us in our programs. Because like I said, none of this would be possible without this team of amazing people that we've got. So also thinking about, I feel like this is just a big brag fest, but I don't care. I'm loving it because we had an amazing year. We really had an amazing year. One of the things when I came on, our colors were this like interesting green, like not a pretty green. And so, and we had this like 3, they kind of look like little aliens sitting at a table. And so one of the things that was always on my to-do list was how to rebrand M.A.R.C.H. And I know nothing about any of this. I'm going to be 100% honest. So I'll give a shout out to Learfield Communications. Stephanie was huge. And then we had an NCAPS intern. He's a high school student who was looking for marketing to add to his resume. So he helped us. His name was Brett. So we all met for a long time to create a ton of what I would call printables, posters, brochures. We made social promos. So if you go on our YouTube channel, I didn't even know what a social promo was. It's like a commercial in the 21st century. Like, anyway. And so we were really busy making a ton of what I would just call super cool ways to get the word out about M.A.R.C.H. and about what we're doing. And then we also launched a radio ad in the Columbia area on Y107 that just wrapped up. And so it's been fun working with, and that was through Zimmer Communications, just to give them a shout out. So it's been a lot of fun in creating all of this stuff. And then, if you're ever interested or you want brochures, give us a call, or you can get online. Stephanie's created a whole page where you can request posters and brochures and different things, and we will mail them to you. One of the big things that I think is kind of launching us into the 21st century as well is the QR code on our printables. So if you go up, like if a poster is hanging in a courthouse, you can take your phone and literally that QR code will take the client directly to the request a service page and they can fill it out. So just trying to find quick, easy ways for people to get connected and get, see if they're eligible for free services as quickly as possible. We also launched a newsletter this past year. I'm going to tell you, Stephanie did all of that. So now that you are on our list, if you will receive our newsletter. You are more than welcome to unsubscribe, but it only comes once a month and people love it because it's one page and it gets to the point. I have heard that so many times. They're like, Dawn, we actually read your newsletter because it's only one page. You highlight it and you move on. And I'm like, boom, that's what we do. So it's just another, and plus you'll know like free trainings and things that are going on. And so it's a quick, easy way to just stay connected with what we've got going on here at M.A.R.C.H. So some of our goals for the new fiscal year, my goal is to create and fill an assistant director position. This has never existed at M.A.R.C.H. And so I've been creating job descriptions and trying to think about salary and what's fair and how to make all this work. So if anybody ever has good feedback on that, please send me like your job descriptions or anything that I should know and things to think about in terms of an assistant director. Our goal is to increase our digital media presence. So we are seeking volunteers for a digital media committee. So if you're interested in serving in that, we plan on creating a podcast. We need a name of this podcast. As of right now, Stephanie's calling it a podcast experience with Dawn Kuhlman, which that is not what we are going to call this. I'm not going to be with M.A.R.C.H. forever. And so, eventually I will retire. And so I want to come up with some cool name that can stay with M.A.R.C.H. and just, ideas that can just keep getting handed down over time. Starting a monthly blog. And then, like I said, creating a conference committee with hosting a conference in March of 2025. My goal would be to have a breakout session with family support division and maybe a breakout session with children's division. And we would just find all the different ways that we can bring all the people together who are helping families in Missouri. We're going to host Melissa. Melissa, if you want to wave, bless Melissa's heart. So she's in the 25th circuit, which is down in Phelps area, somewhere down there. And she's going to be doing a lot of outreach for us around that area. So she's going to be doing presentations. She's going to be giving out brochures. She's going to be talking to the courts, talking to nonprofits. So if you are anywhere around the 25th circuit, please send Melissa, if you want to send her a chat and just get her connected with you right now. That way she kind of has some starting points in terms of how she can market us down there. Also, that will help us increase outreach in what's called Region 1. So real quick, my funding is divided down the middle of the state. So I have Region 1, which is the St. Louis side of the state, and then I have Region 2, which is the Kansas City side of the state. Obviously, I'm on the Kansas City side, so we always double production compared to Region 1. The state does not like that, so I'm constantly trying to figure out how we can increase Region 1, and so hopefully Melissa can help us achieve that. Again, we're going to try to continually better serve families involved in the juvenile court, and then the lobbying firm is planning to seek some additional funding so we can continue to grow and serve more families in Missouri. So I am right at my 12:50 mark, which is good because I wanted to leave about 10 minutes for questions. Real fast, you are going to receive an email that's going to have a recorded version of this. It's going to have a certificate. It's for those of you that need the MOBAR CLEs. It's going to have that number with a certificate attached to it. You're going to have some handouts in terms of the service usage in the state of Missouri, and you'll have the PowerPoint, and then there's going to be a quick online SurveyMonkey evaluation for you to fill out in terms of your thoughts and feedback on today. Plus, the Missouri Bar makes me do that for CLE approval. So, questions, thoughts, ideas. I just threw a ton of information at you. Mindy, you want to wave? So whenever you call, if anybody calls M.A.R.C.H Mediation, that's who you talk to right there. Stephanie, did you wave already? I think you did. Yay! Nobody has any questions. We're just killing it at M.A.R.C.H, apparently. Huh? Oh, hang on. Stephanie says that's not true. Stephanie says I do have questions. So hang on. She says she's got them in my Google Doc here. let me open this up and then we'll start to go. Do you all provide an in-house domestic violence training? Just notice the DV training requirement. Okay, so we do have, it's a requirement that our mediators have 8 hours of domestic violence training. Typically 4 of those hours are included in your domestic mediation training alone. So if somebody has any sort of like what I would call abuse or neglect training, if you're a guardian ad litem, I let that fall under the parameters of that domestic violence training. So typically people have 8 hours once you begin to look at all that you've been trained in. And then the other question, oh, Gretchen, can you describe some more detail of how we would use the supervised visitation program? Can M.A.R.C.H be part of an ongoing final order, mother to have weekly visitation as supervised by M.A.R.C.H supervisor, or intended for only temporary orders? That's actually a really good question, Gretchen, and I am still trying to figure out the answer to that myself. Right now, it's sort of a free range chicken. We can let them go for a while. It's not going to be indefinitely. My contract, well, the M.A.R.C.H contract with the state ends in 2025. I'll be curious to see if that's still in there in 2025 when it's time to renew the contract, honestly. I don't know what the state will put in or take out in the future. So at least until 2025, the family can get up to 4 hours for a certain amount of time. I will say that since not that many families are taking advantage of this particular service, I'm going to be a little bit more lenient on what that looks like because we have the funding to use. So the answer is it depends. So there's that, right? Oh, shoot. I'll have to navigate it case by case on that. Any other questions? These are good. Okay. Malia, do you want to show us? So Malia is my contract liaison with the state of Missouri. Where is she? I was going to have you wave, Malia. She may not want to do it.
I'm having issues with my camera, but I'm here.
Oh, hello. So Malia is also my boss. She tells me what to do, but very nice. She's very polite about it. I have a lot of bosses.
You make it so easy.
What did you say?
I said, I love working with you. You make
we love working with you. Okay, well, you guys are more than welcome to jump off, but if anybody has any specific questions, feel free to stay on. I know it can be a little overwhelming. People can be scared. But I really do look forward to the next fiscal year. I think it's going to be a good year. Thank you. Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
Sharon?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Great presentation.
Oh, thanks.
Great, and congratulations to your entire team.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you.
I would like if you can elaborate on the subject matter of the supervised visitation, and how you go about it in reference to identifying a provider. Is that, is it those who already provide those services, or because you did say individual, if I understand, you said individual as well as other nonprofit organizations.
Yeah. So what state are you in?
We are here in U.S. Virgin Islands.
Oh, I've talked with you before, haven't I?
Yeah, when I first started. How are you?
Yes.
You have grown tremendously. Congrats.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. So we in the state of Missouri, we do not have any sort of regulation in terms of who can be a provider.
Uh-huh.
There's no law saying like you have to have this degree or this sort of training to be a visit supervisor. I'm going to be honest, I feel like it's the Wild West out here.
Okay.
And so our particular requirements are you have to be 21 years of age, you have to pass the background check, you have to be registered with what's called the Family Care Safety Registry. But after that, that's pretty much it. And I'll be honest, we don't pay a ton of money. We pay up to $50 for 2 hours. That's $25 an hour. And as you know, visits can be very challenging in the sense of people want to call and complain and do all these things. And so it's hard to keep people at that rate. One of the things that we can, that we try to do is that we try to work with our local, we have what's called Children's Division, which is like the abuse and neglect unit. Those workers are often willing to contract with us. They just have to make sure they tell the state of Missouri that they are doing this with us in case to make sure that they eliminate any sort of conflict of interest. So Children's Division workers or teachers, those are people who are also willing to do it at that rate.
So do you do a site visit? Thanks for sharing. So those individuals, for example, let's look at Department of Human Services.
Yeah.
Do you, what I want to
No, I don't do any. Everybody's on their own. I really do it as a referral. It's a referral based process. We do that with our mediations. We do that with the attorney work. We do that with the supervisors. Everybody's operating under their own LLC or as a sole proprietor. And so we let them handle business the way that they would handle their own business.
Okay.
I mean, I do
Very
have
good.
some structure. The state tells me that I have to, like, parents are to parent in the visits. Like, we're not like a parent aide per se. We're truly there just to supervise.
Okay. So how is the process? Who notifies the SVN, the supervised providers of this visitation?
So let's say, for example, a parent calls us and says, hey, I want to see my kid. Like, we had a lady, she said, I've been in prison for like the last 20 years, or I don't remember what it was. She'd been in prison for a while. She wants to reconnect and have some time with her kid. So I guess that doesn't make any sense because the kid would be 20. Anyway, you know where I'm going with this. And so we then contact the other parent. We say, hey, we've received a request for a supervised visit. Would you be willing to do this? They tell us yes or no. Then if they say yes, we then find a supervisor in their area and we say, hey, we have a case for you. And we share their contact information. And that's it until they're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's good to reconnect with you.
Yes. Yeah. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, it's right at 1. Thank you for, oh, Charles, did you have a question?
Yes. Are there other similar entities such as yours, as M.A.R.C.H in other states?
Not that I know of.
Hmm.
That's partly why there were so many AV recipients today on here, because at the federal level, the federal level is very impressed with what M.A.R.C.H is doing and the direction that we're doing and that we're going. And so the goal is to see if there's ways to replicate this model in other states.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Absolutely. That would be interesting to maybe stand on your shoulders and springboard.
So there's been 2 things that have been mentioned. One is I start to apply for funding in other states and managing their programs, or I show them how I did it. The trick is, honestly, every AV recipient is different in terms of how they use it. So how they get their funding, how it comes to them, where it goes, everybody's very different. So
Well, Dawn, you need to franchise it.
Well, they're asking me about that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I'm glad I was here. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Now, where are you, Charles? I think you're Kansas.
Yeah, Hutchinson, Kansas.
Okay.
It's just a little northwest of Wichita.
You know, one of the things so I got a call from, I think it was somewhere around your area. 3 gals who were wanting to replicate what we're doing here. And I said, why don't you just use us? Like, because we do everything through electronic formats, why can't you just funnel your work under M.A.R.C.H and then we just pay you? Versus they were going to create a nonprofit and try to do, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. This was a
Yeah.
lot of work, and it still is a lot of work.
Hmm.
So I'm open to M.A.R.C.H expanding beyond Missouri. Because we've got the 800 number. It's an online request. It's
Right.
just, I mean, literally just how we have all the circuits listed in Missouri. We'd have a new page of all the circuits listed in Kansas. And then we'd have a whole page of all the circuits listed in a different, the formula is the same. It's just, yeah.
Interesting. Just tap into what's
Tap
already
into
existing.
what's already there.
Well, suddenly that sounds a lot easier.
That's what I said. I was like, I said, I might sound selfish when I say this, but why don't you just come through me? Like, I've already got this all set up.
Right.
It's a win-win.
Well, I'll do a lot more research on this and look into it. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thanks, Charles. Okay. Closing it out.